Hello, this is EJK, and this is going to be a TvP analysis on Innovation's Mech that he showcased against Hurricane in the Shoutcraft King of the Hill in Total Biscuits thingy. So, Innovation has been playing around with Cyclones a lot. It's very interesting to see. In this game, he goes for a gas first into barracks, and then he goes for a Reaper expand. The reason you go gas before barracks is your command center is like delayed by like 2 or 3 seconds, but your factory is also a lot faster as well. So if you're doing something like trying to rush out a starport or rush out cyclones, then going gas first makes a lot of sense. Because you don't necessarily need that economic advantage earlier on. Like getting that mule out 3 seconds earlier isn't really going to help your play. Hurricane, on the other hand, is going for a very standard build. Just Gate, Nexus, Cyber, Second Gas, Pylon, and he ends up going for a... He tries to go for like a DT drop, and Innovation's going for 2 Factory Cyclones. Now, there's a lot of kind of build order advantage that Innovation gets from doing this build against a DT drop, and that's mainly what contributes to Innovation having such a big lead throughout most of this game. Because the DT drop, even if it doesn't do damage, it delays your blink and it delays your glaive speed, and it also delays your tech, like your immortal production and your if you're trying to... No, you wouldn't be trying to go for fast stargates. Going for fast stargates is just gonna die to this. But just immortal production and getting like immortal Archon up faster to critical mass. That's a good army composition that works against Cyclones and tanks and pretty much every mech unit, to be honest. But Innovation, very interested to know why he's experimenting around so much with mech. Most likely because the patch, well, he's out of, the SKT is out of Pro League, I believe. KT1, I'm like 99% sure. And now the patch is the only thing that, like, Innovation's just looking forward to the patch, I suppose. So he's just experimenting around with mech and seeing its weaknesses, so he can be able to better understand what the patch is going to change, which does change a lot. And I'll go over that in another video in the near future about TvP and TvT. I already did one on TvZ. You guys can check it out on my channel. I'll leave a link in the description too, just to be nice. So, if you're making mass cyclones early on and you're on 2 factors before a 3rd base, usually, not even usually, all the time, you cannot afford a starport early on, and your tank count will be significantly weaker. It's going to be significantly delayed because you're going to be making cyclones instead of siege tanks. Those are the 2 weaknesses of the build, and they can be punished by going for a heavy blink attack to kind of counter the fact that you don't have a high tank count and you're relying mostly on cyclones, which take about as long as a tank to make and are just extremely fragile. So if you have, say, like 20 stalkers against... And you can also mass up stalkers a lot faster than you can mass up cyclones as well. So that's a reason why Blink Stalker timings are very strong against this. The only way to stop Blink Stalker timings, really, is by having tanks in proper position. Because as soon as the Blink Stalkers start snowballing, you're in a lot of trouble, because they're just going to keep warping in from a forward reinforcement point and keep blinking and keep taking slightly better trades and just outproduce you with gateway units. Innovation is able to get this snipe off on Hurricane's 3rd base because Hurricane did do the DT drop. He didn't have any vision of the Cyclones coming in. If he did, I think he could have chained up enough DTs so that Innovation would be forced to run away. Actually, that wouldn't work because Innovation could just move around with the Cyclone lock-on and just keep moving away from the DTs. The only things that really stop Cyclones from being aggressive are Blink Stalkers. Also, Phoenixes do a very good job at shutting Cyclones down because it's just if you can lift up enough Cyclones at once, then Cyclones, like, you can lift them up right after they start locking on, and then that makes them pretty useless because their auto attack is fairly weak compared to their lock on. Lock on also is not affected by armor upgrades too, by the way, which is a cool. I don't know if that's something that was obvious to people or not. So we see 8 Cyclones, only 1 tank, and Innovation has decided to go into Widow Mines. I don't mind that decision. Against fast air switches, that's good. Widow Mines can help zone out Tempests and help the Cyclones get close enough, and to help just zone out the Protoss army so that they can section away like the Protoss 4th base or something, and take advantages that way. Or against carriers, Widow Mines are just generally good against interceptors. What Hurricane is adding into his army is, instead of adding immortal productions or trying to go for a fast air switch or trying to get Charge Law Archon composition up, he's going for a fast 4th, which is the proper decision for a couple reasons. Because his 3rd was delayed, he's double expanding to catch up in economy, and because Innovation is going for Mech, you can take that 4th base a lot faster because you don't have to worry about bio drops. What Hurricane is doing, though, is he's adding in a lot of disruptors into his army, and I don't really like that decision because if Innovation has, well, like, the disruptors aren't a bad unit, would say, against Mech. To be honest, Protoss doesn't have any bad units against Mech, except maybe Sentries and Adepts. So making disruptors now, I think, isn't the worst decision in the world, but I think there's a lot better things that Hurricane can be spending his money with. Also, by getting that faster 4th base, he's also had to delay his gateway production and, like, his gateway count and his gateway unit production because he's been consistently making probes for the past couple minutes because he needs to saturate the 3rd base and the 4th base and the main and the actual for a couple minutes. So he needs to go above and beyond the normal probe count to be able to do that. He is going for, like, other than that, Innovation's army is very kind of, I would say, meh. This army's composition is only scary. Innovation's only up 30 supply because Cyclones are bloated units. They do cost 4 supply instead of 3. And also the fact that he was able to cancel the 3rd base, so Hurricane's production is mostly delayed. Oh my gosh, and already there, the Disruptor is already worth their weight in gold. It's very hard to, I would say almost impossible, to be able to kite multiple Disruptors and still be able to use Cyclones, because Cyclones need to get too close to kite, and by the time that they lock on, the Disruptors are already shooting their balls, and then the Cyclones are just such bulky units that it takes too long for them to split away, and it generally is not, they generally do not trade very well against Disruptors. So Innovation takes a big hit there. Cyclones are also not expensive units either, so losing like 4 to 5 Cyclones is a lot of money. It's not something that you can just laugh at. Again, we see Innovation. He doesn't have a starport, and it's 10 minutes into the game, and he has a 4th base. So he's relying purely on this very factory-heavy composition, just going for Cyclone, Hellion, Widow Mines, no tanks, no Liberators, no Vikings. And we already see here that Hurricane's army, although significantly smaller, he's able to get away with that just because of how Cyclones and Widow Mines work. It's just generally not a very strong composition. It doesn't have a lot of synergies. They don't cover each other's weaknesses well. Liberators aren't as bad because they can zone out Stalkers and almost all gateway units a lot faster as soon as you get Liberator range. Not very hard to do, especially if you can afford 6 factories. Innovation does have 6 factories, by the way, before he gets a starport. So you can afford to make an additional, basically there's money in the game to be able to get Liberator range, especially on 4 bases. Very doable. So Hurricane has been expanding throughout the entire map. He's at 76 probes, so even though he has this 5th base, he can't even mine from it really very efficiently because he's reached his limit in worker supply. We saw it a little bit earlier, he was taking the gas in the 5th base. He already has about 800 gas banked up, and he's going for the Tempest switch, which is nice. Tempests are a good unit. As long as you have a gateway army underneath to buy enough time for the Cyclones to kind of like lock on, then disengage, then lock on, then disengage. Lock on cooldown is 4 seconds, and although that might not seem very long, in a Cyclone's lifetime, 4 seconds is a very short time. We see Hurricane making a bunch of Adepts. So the Adepts are not the smartest unit composition choice to make, but the decision behind it is to sack these Adepts and buy enough time for enough Tempests to be out, so then Hurricane will have the superior army. And he's also attacking in multiple places at once too. And we see the Liberators don't have Liberator range, so they're not giving enough space for the Cyclones to be able to like zone out the disruptor shots from the Cyclones so that the Cyclones can actually get lock-ons. And so Innovation's not really able to punish this, and he lost a lot of workers at his 4th base. He also lost a lot of mining time, and now it's 5 bases versus 3 bases for a short period there. So Hurricane was earning an even bigger economic lead than normal, or than you might think. One thing I believe Hurricane is not doing is he's not researching air upgrades. We need to see the production tab, but I guess not. Hurricane is also doing a good job expanding, so he has a lot of money banked up at this point in the game. Innovation doesn't, because he's been losing a lot of Cyclones. Cyclones are very, very difficult units to like use currently, because if you trade cost efficiently with Cyclones, you're very far ahead of the game, and there's almost no chance for the Protoss to get back in. If you're not trading very cost efficiently, then you're pretty much going to lose the game, because Cyclones are more expensive to replenish, and they are just really, they're not worth, it's very hard to get their money worth in cost efficiency. Let's just put it at that. 150 minerals, 100 gas makes them a lot more expensive than a Stalker. Makes them like a less expensive version of an Immortal, I would say. So Innovation has a lot of Liberators here. No range though. Even though he did have the money at one point, I would say he doesn't now, because it's 14 minutes into the game, and this is the point when in Legacy of the Void your bases start to mine out, your main and natural, and if you took your 3rd base very fast, which both players did, those are going to start to become depleted about a minute or 2 earlier than normal, because you got that 3rd gas accessible earlier on. This is a huge overextension by Hurricane, losing all those important gateway units. And to think that Hurricane still wins the game from here is pretty amazing. I think that kind of speaks for itself how bad Mech is. Or not so much how bad Mech is, but how bad Innovation's approach to this Mech style is, by relying on a hugely factory-based gateway army. If he had like 2 starports with reactors faster, or just any starport production, he would have been able to punish this. Basically the only way you can punish Tempest currently without the new changes, like without the Thor versus Tempest ground air change. Tempest only have 5 ground. You have to have a preemptive amount of Vikings, so that by the time the Protoss player starts producing Tempest, which produce very fast by the way, you have enough Vikings on the ground so that you can be aggressive and kind of catch the Protoss player before they get a critical amount of Tempest. We see Innovation has 0 Vikings, and even though he has a lot of things that shoot up, the Tempests are very easy. Like, they're fast enough units so that they can escape from Cyclones, and they also do enough damage that they can slowly chip away Cyclones as well. So now Innovation's pretty dead right now. 8 Tempest out for Hurricane, and only 3 Cyclones and 2 Widow Mines out for Innovation. So Innovation, he didn't really have any anti-air in his army. And what the current changes do is that they reclassify a lot of the Terran mech units, so that there are specific units that are meant to be just made for anti-air, and that aren't going to be very useful for ground, and vice versa. There's a lot of ground units that won't be very good at fighting air units, such as the Cyclone. And I think that's the direction that Blizzard is headed with Mech in TvP, or just Mech in general. Just a complete redesign of the Terran tech units. So innovation, he's got one last shot, I guess. He's on 5 bases. He's down a base. He's making an inferior unit composition, but the glass half full story is that he's able to max out one more time, even if he has a kind of crappy army. Archons are very good against Cyclones currently because Archons are not armored units, so they only take 20 damage per lock-on volley. Lock-on, every shot is 20 damage to non-armored units and 40 damage to armored units, and it goes right through armor too. And Archons having 360 HP means that it takes 18 Cyclone shots to kill a single Archon. So you really, and it still takes a long time to kill Tempest just because they have a lot of HP. And oh my gosh, that's too bad right there. One Disruptor killing enough Cyclones to make the Tempest trade right earlier on not worth it. What Innovation needs to do to kill these kinds of units is he needs to lock on multiple Cyclones, 3 to 4 of them on the Tempests or the Archons, and try to thin out the army that way, so that when he gets in range, he's only in range for a couple volleys of Protoss units, and he doesn't have to keep going back and forth and losing, like, just getting units picked off left and right. It's very hard to be able to chain enough lock-ons and get close enough to the Protoss army in general when the Protoss player has all these stupid disruptors. So like now the disruptors, they cannot be touched. Their disruptor ball has no counter basically currently because you can't get ranged liberators against this many tempests. Siege tanks suck. They're just gonna the Archons are just gonna absorb some siege tank shots, and then the Terran player will die. Or the Tempest can just pick off the siege tanks, and the Protoss player doesn't even have to lose anything. Really, the Protoss player can do a lot. The Protoss player has a lot of leeway in playing versus Mech right now. And like Innovation's going for some counterattacks, which is nice, but that's about the best he can do. He's not even going to win a full straight up base trade because his units don't fly. Yeah, so this unit composition just does not scale very well against Protoss units in general. And you really need siege tanks to stabilize in this matchup against all the different gateway attacks that Protoss can do against you. However, siege tanks are really bad and don't do enough damage, so like you have to mass them up a lot faster, and it takes a bigger investment to be able. So you basically have to blind counter a lot of different timings so that you have enough units out so that you can actually defend a lot of different timings. Innovation is making this look close. However, he just has no answer to 6 Tempests in the air with some ground units beneath. The Tempests are just going to outrange everything. The Cyclones just don't, like, worst case scenario, they're left with their 2 armies, and Hurricane just remakes. Well, he might not be able, he has 53 probes, and I think he's still mining. Like, he's making this a lot closer than it has to be. He still has the trump cards for sure. He has multiple trump cards too, by the way. It's not like he's barely winning this. I would say this is decisively over in his favor. Innovation is just doing his best to prolong the game. That's definitely the right option, but oh my god, those disruptor shots. There's just no way you can get lock on and get close enough to this army. It's a nice little flank going down, but there's just simply too many disruptors. By the time that the battle, like, before the battle finishes, you can get a second round of disruptor shots off because he has enough disruptors to just chain the cooldown, and GG is called. Good game. But I think a lot of the weaknesses of Mech are exploited here, which I think the new balance patch will change.